The woman did not merely reject Kang Min-jun. She climbed onto the dining table, pointed at the most feared mafia boss in Seoul, and screamed, "I would rather marry the waiter." Every fork in the private restaurant froze in midair. The handsome Korean boss remained seated beneath the chandelier, dressed in a black designer suit with tattoos crawling above his collar and across the portion of his chest visible beneath his open shirt. 12 armed guards waited for his command, but he only stared at the seventh woman who had rejected him that year. She grabbed her handbag, kicked off her heels, and ran barefoot through the kitchen. The waiter immediately removed his name badge. No one laughed. No one except the boss's black assistant. Standing near the door in a fitted burgundy trouser suit, Vanessa Hart pressed her lips together, but the sound escaped anyway. Kang Min-jun slowly turned toward her. "You find this amusing?" "A little." "Then explain it. Why does every woman run from me?" She glanced at the terrified guests, the armed guards, and the enormous man whose tattooed neck made even innocent questions sound like threats. Then she walked closer, leaned toward his ear, and whispered 6 words that made the deadliest man in Seoul drop his glass. "You are too big down there." The entire restaurant went silent. One guard began coughing. Kang Min-jun rose slowly, towering over her. But before he could demand an explanation, every light in the building suddenly went out. Before we uncover what happened next, subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments. Would you run from a dangerous man everyone fears, or stay long enough to discover the secret hidden beneath him? Because tonight, one fearless assistant is about to learn that some men are rejected for a reason, and some secrets become deadly the moment they are spoken aloud. 3 weeks before that dinner, the lights inside Cheongdam-dong's most exclusive restaurant, Yule House, glowed soft and gold. A single table sat prepared for 2, set with hand-painted porcelain and a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Kang Min-jun sat at the head of it, 34 years old, black hair combed back, a scar hidden beneath his jaw that only 3 people alive had ever seen up close. Across from him sat Choi Eun-chai, the daughter of a shipping magnate, wearing a pale pink dress and an expression that had started the evening polite and was now sliding toward panic. He studied his water glass instead of her face. He always did this. Eye contact, his security chief once told him, made people nervous, and Min-jun had decided years ago that nervous women asked fewer questions. "Do you see yourself?" he asked, in the same flat tone he used to order executions. Producing an heir for the Kang family? Eun-chai choked on her sparkling water. A waiter rushed over with a napkin. Min-jun watched the man's hands shake as he set it down, and something twisted behind his ribs that felt almost like guilt, though he did not have a name for the feeling. "I'm sorry," Eun-chai said, dabbing her mouth. "I think I misheard you." "You did not." She laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Right? Of course." Across the room, near the kitchen door, a man in a dark coat lifted a phone toward the table and then lowered it quickly when a guard turned his head. Min-jun's eyes caught the movement. He stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Lock the doors," he told the restaurant manager. "No one leaves until I say so." The manager's face went white. Eun-chai's face went whiter. "You think someone is filming us?" she whispered. "I think someone is always filming me." That was enough. Eun-chai grabbed her handbag, kicked off her heels because they clicked too loudly on the marble, and ran barefoot through the kitchen doors, leaving one shoe under the table and her dignity somewhere on the sidewalk outside. Min-jun's security chief, Park Tae-hyun, a broad man with a permanently tired face, cleared his throat from the doorway. "That's 7, Tae-hyun said. 7 women in 12 months, sir. I know how to count. I'm only saying it out loud because you seem to have forgotten." Min-jun said nothing. He picked up the abandoned shoe, turned it over once in his hand, and set it gently on the table, as though it were evidence in a case he did not yet understand. That same evening, 4 floors above street level in the Kang Group's glass headquarters on Tehran RO. A woman named Vanessa Hart sat in a waiting room for 43 minutes. She was 29, sharp-eyed, dressed in a cream trouser suit with pointed heels and small gold hoops. Her natural hair pulled back into a low, neat bun. She had flown from New York 6 days earlier for this interview, and she had already redone the building's visitor log twice because the receptionist kept spelling her last name wrong. When Kang Min-jun finally walked in, trailed by 2 guards, he expected the woman waiting for him to look nervous the way everyone else in this building looked nervous. She looked at her watch instead. A man who controls half of Gangnam's shipping routes should understand the concept of punctuality, she said, standing to shake his hand as if he were any other executive running 40 minutes late. The guards behind him went rigid. "Do you know who I am?" Min-jun asked. "I know you're 43 minutes late," Vanessa said. "That's all I need to know for now." He almost smiled. He caught himself before it reached his mouth, but not before Taehyun noticed it. "You're hired," Min-jun said. "I haven't shown you my resume. I don't need it. I need someone who isn't afraid of me." "I didn't say I wasn't afraid of you," Vanessa said, sliding a folder across the desk toward him. "I said I know what time it is. Those are different things." Her first hour on the job, one of the younger guards, a nervous man named Kwon, sidled up to her desk and lowered his voice. "You should smile less at him," Kwon whispered. "It makes people wonder what you know." "I don't know anything yet," Vanessa said, typing without looking up. "Give me a week." "A week is optimistic. I don't do pessimistic. It's bad for productivity." Kwon glanced over his shoulder, then back at her, clearly unsure whether she was joking. She wasn't entirely. Her first assignment was to organize dinner number 8. Within 2 days, she noticed a pattern that unsettled her more than his reputation did. Every woman who left his table did not simply seem frightened of a mafia boss. They seemed frightened of something specific, something they had been told before they ever sat down. She found him 3 nights later standing at the window of his private office on the 40th floor, shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, tattoos visible beneath the fabric, fresh bruises darkening across his knuckles from an underground fight he had attended without telling his own security detail. "Why does every woman reject me?" he asked, not turning around. Vanessa set down the folder she was carrying. She looked at the blueprints spread across his desk, floor plans of his mansion with rooms marked in red ink, underground levels stacked 3 deep beneath the property, a private tunnel running toward the harbor. She looked at the 12 guards stationed outside his door. She looked at him. "You are too big down there," she said. The room went still. A guard near the door dropped his phone. Min-jun turned around slowly, disbelief written plainly across a face that rarely showed anything at all. "Excuse me." "Your empire," Vanessa said, before he could spiral into the wrong conclusion. "What's underneath your businesses? Underneath this building, underneath your house. It's too large, too dangerous, too deeply buried for any woman with sense to walk into willingly. You don't need better manners, Mr. Kang. You need a smaller basement." Color rose along his neck, embarrassment doing what no threat had ever managed. "You could have simply said that," he muttered. "I did simply say that." He was quiet for a long moment, turning the shoe from the failed dinner over in his hands, the same one he had carried up from the restaurant and never thrown away. 30 days, he said finally. "You will teach me to be a man a woman could marry without fear. I will pay you whatever amount you ask." Vanessa crossed her arms. "Weekends off. A bonus large enough that I never have to explain it to my accountant. And full authority to confiscate every weapon in this building before your dates." "Agreed. Then we have a deal, Mr. Kang." That night, alone in the small serviced apartment the company had arranged for her, Vanessa opened a laptop she was not supposed to have access to and began tracing a wire transfer she had noticed buried in the company's outgoing accounts. Small payments, recurring, sent to 7 different women over the past year. The same 7 names now crossed off Min-jun's list of failed engagements. Someone had paid every one of them to leave. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on Tehran RO 30 floors below. Whoever wanted Kang Min-jun alone badly enough to bribe 7 women had access to money, patience, and information most people never got close to. That kind of access came from inside the house, not outside it. The next morning, she brought him coffee instead of the usual schedule folder and set it down without a word. "You don't normally bring coffee," Min-jun said, eyeing the cup like it might be evidence. "I don't normally like you this much either." "Things change." "That's not an answer. I'm allowed one kind gesture a month, Mr. Kang. Don't read into it." He almost smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes before he remembered to stop it. That same night, long after the office had emptied, Taehyun knocked once and let himself in without waiting for permission, a habit only he was allowed. "You hired her fast," Taehyun said, nodding toward the door Vanessa had left through an hour earlier. "She corrected the meeting schedule before I even walked in the room. She also told you that you were too big down there in front of half the senior staff." She wasn't wrong. Taehyun raised an eyebrow. "You're taking advice from a woman you met 4 days ago. She's the first person in this building who hasn't lied to me in 4 days, Min-jun said. "That's worth more than 4 years of the alternative." Taehyun didn't argue. He switched off half the lights on his way out and left his boss alone with a stranger's abandoned shoe still sitting in his desk drawer and the first honest conversation he'd had in longer than he wanted to admit. Vanessa titled the document on her laptop Operation Make Him Behave Like a Human Being, then immediately deleted the title because she didn't trust anyone in that building not to read her files. Rule 1. No weapons at the dinner table. Rule 2. No background checks before dessert arrives. Rule 3. No threatening restaurant staff, waiters, valets, or musicians. Rule 4. Never ask a woman whether she is physically capable of producing sons. Rule 5. No surrounding a cafe with 20 armed men because the coffee took longer than expected. Min-jun read the list twice and set it down like it had personally offended him. These rules are unreasonable. These rules are the bare minimum required for you to be legally allowed near a woman on a first date. Their first lesson was conversation. Vanessa asked him what he liked to do for fun. "Finding traitors," he said, without a flicker of humor. "People usually say reading, or traveling, or cooking. I don't cook." "Then you're about to learn." She dragged him into the enormous marble kitchen of his penthouse 2 days later, where a private chef stood frozen at the sight of his employer, holding a paring knife the way other men held weapons. The chef found an excuse to check on something in the pantry and did not return. "You're holding a vegetable like it insulted your family," Vanessa said. "It's slippery." "It's a carrot, Mr. Kang." Within 20 minutes, smoke filled the kitchen. Sauce splattered across the face of his watch, a watch that cost more than the apartment Vanessa grew up in. He stared at the ruined pot like it had betrayed him personally, and Vanessa laughed so hard she had to sit down on the cold marble floor, one hand pressed against her ribs. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Kang Min-jun laughed with someone instead of at someone. It came out rusty, like a door that hadn't opened in years, but it was real. Their second lesson was flirting, and it went even worse than the first. Vanessa sat him down at a small table in the penthouse's private dining room, 2 cups of coffee between them, and told him to imagine she was a woman he'd just met at a gallery opening. "Ask me something light," she said. "Something that isn't a threat." Min-jun studied her for a long moment, arms crossed. "What is your relationship to this gallery?" "That's an interrogation question." "It's a normal question." "Try again. Ask me what I like." "What do you like?" Say it like you're curious, not like you're confirming a statement for a case file. He exhaled slowly through his nose, the closest thing to frustration he allowed himself in front of her. "What do you like better?" "Now react when I answer." I like painting. Painting what? Anything. Landscapes. Landscapes of what location? Give me the coordinates. Vanessa dropped her forehead into her hand. Mr. Calm. I am trying. You are cross-examining me. Fine. He leaned back, jaw tight, and tried once more, softer this time. Tell me about your painting. Better, she said, looking up. See? That wasn't so hard. It was very hard. She laughed despite herself, and something in his shoulders loosened at the sound of it. Their third lesson went worse than the second. During a mock date staged in a private room of a restaurant near Apgujeong, complete with a hired waiter and low candlelight neither of them had asked for, Min-jun leaned across the table, eyes narrowed, and demanded that Vanessa reveal her true intentions. The hired waiter froze mid-pour. My true intentions, Vanessa said flatly, are to survive dinner with you without needing a lawyer present. Min-jun blinked. Then, slowly, a real laugh broke out of him, low and surprised, like he hadn't given himself permission for it in advance. The waiter, visibly relieved, finished pouring the wine and retreated as fast as dignity allowed. That was a joke, Min-jun said, still smiling. I know. You made it. I'm shocked too. The days that followed built something neither of them had planned for. Vanessa noticed he never slept a full night, that he ate dinner alone at his desk more often than not, and that he kept an old voicemail from his mother saved on a phone he had replaced 4 times, transferring the recording each time like a man protecting the last piece of something. He noticed that Vanessa sent part of every paycheck to an account she refused to discuss. He noticed she flinched whenever his missing chief financial officer's name came up in meetings. He noticed she never once asked him about his family, which made him suspicious in a way her questions never had. During a practice date at a quiet restaurant in Itaewon, 2 men dressed as waiters approached their table with movements too smooth for staff who had only worked there a week. Vanessa saw it half a second before Min-jun did. She pulled him sideways out of his chair as the first man's hand went for something hidden beneath his apron, and by the time Min-jun's guards burst through the front door, both attackers were already face down on the floor, and Vanessa was standing over them, breathing hard, one heel broken off her shoe. Min-jun stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Executive assistants don't move like that. I took a self-defense class, Vanessa said, straightening her jacket. New York is a dangerous city. That wasn't a self-defense class. She didn't answer. That night, back at his penthouse, he cleaned a shallow cut across her palm with careful, deliberate hands, the same hands that had broken bones without hesitation on more than one occasion. Their usual teasing quieted into something else. Vanessa's fingers traced the edge of a tattoo disappearing beneath his collar, an old habit of curiosity rather than intention. Do they mean something? All of these. Some represent loyalty, he said. Some represent loss. He paused, and his voice dropped lower. One across my chest covers a scar my father gave me. Their faces moved closer. His hand found the side of her jaw. For one full second, Seoul seemed to hold its breath around them. Then the office door banged open and Taehyun walked in carrying a badly burned roast chicken on a silver tray, asking with total sincerity whether it should be buried in the garden or served to the staff for dinner. The moment shattered. Vanessa laughed so hard she nearly fell off the counter. Min-jun buried his face in his hands and, for once, did not order anyone's punishment. 2 nights later, deep inside a financial database she was never supposed to have clearance for, Vanessa found the account responsible for bribing 7 separate women to abandon Kang Min-jun. It traced back through 3 shell companies and landed, finally, on a name she recognized from every family dinner Min-jun had ever mentioned. His uncle, Han Ji-hoon, the man who raised him after his father died. The man everyone in the organization trusted without question. Han Ji-hoon had been paying women to reject his own nephew. Vanessa sat with that information for a long time, unsure what frightened her more, the discovery itself or how badly she now wanted to protect the man she had been sent to investigate. The act ended 2 days later with a plain envelope slid beneath her apartment door. Inside was a photograph of her older brother, Malcolm, tied to a wooden chair in a room she didn't recognize, his face bruised, his eyes closed. Across the bottom, in handwritten block letters, someone had written 4 words. "Stop investigating, or he dies." Vanessa Hart had not always been an executive assistant. 2 years earlier, she had worked as an intelligence analyst for a private security firm out of Washington, tracing illegal arms shipments moving through East Asian ports. Her brother, Malcolm, had gone undercover inside the Kang organization to trace a weapons pipeline connected to political corruption on 2 continents. Then, without warning, he disappeared. Vanessa had taken the assistant job to find out whether Kang Min-jun ordered her brother's death. What she had found instead, buried in encrypted files she should never have been able to access, suggested the opposite. Min-jun had personally authorized Malcolm's access to restricted shipping manifests. He had been trying to expose corruption inside his own organization, not bury it. She hadn't told him any of this yet. She was still deciding whether telling him would save her brother or get them both killed. Before she could decide, a black car pulled through the estate gates carrying Kim Se-yeon, 28 years old, the eldest daughter of one of Seoul's wealthiest political families. She wore cream silk and an expression of practiced calm, and she announced, in front of Min-jun's entire senior staff, that she was willing to marry him despite everything Seoul whispered about his empire. Han Ji-hoon appeared at her side within the hour, beaming, gripping both their shoulders as if he had personally arranged the match himself. "A perfect fit," he told Min-jun, gripping his shoulder. "Finally, nephew. A wife worthy of this family." Vanessa told herself the assignment was complete. Her 30 days were nearly finished. He had a bride. Her job here was done. Vanessa told herself she only wanted to make sure Seo-yeon understood exactly what she was marrying into. She found the heiress alone in the garden 2 days after her arrival, turning a teacup slowly in her hands. "You know what's underneath this family," Vanessa said, keeping her voice light. "The tunnels, the guards, the accounts nobody talks about at dinner." "I know," Seo-yeon said, not looking up. "My family has known his family for 20 years. And you're still willing to marry him." "Willing isn't the word I would choose." Something flickered behind Seo-yeon's composed expression, gone before Vanessa could name it. "But yes, I'm marrying him." "Why?" Seo-yeon finally looked up, and for one unguarded second, something like fear crossed her face before the practiced calm slid back into place. "Because some things are decided before you're old enough to argue about them, Miss Hart. You wouldn't understand." Vanessa filed the answer away, unsatisfied, certain there was more beneath it than a well-raised daughter's obedience. Jealousy had other plans. She scheduled the engagement dinner for the wrong evening. She ordered white lilies, the one flower Min-jun despised because they had covered his mother's coffin. She accidentally forwarded Seo-yeon a confidential document titled Potential Bride Risk Assessment, a file Vanessa had built out of pure, unprofessional suspicion. Min-jun's jealousy arrived just as clumsily. A prosecutor named Lee Seo-jin began appearing at company events, ostensibly investigating a shipping fraud case, but spending most of his time asking Vanessa questions that had nothing to do with cargo manifests. "You have excellent instincts," Seo-jin told her one afternoon, leaning against her office doorframe with the easy confidence of a man used to getting what he wanted. "Wasted, if you don't mind me saying, on a man who keeps a private army in his basement." "I do mind you saying it," duly noted. He smiled anyway. "Dinner sometime? Strictly professional. I'll even leave the subpoenas at the office." "I'll think about it," Vanessa said, mostly to end the conversation. Min-jun, standing unseen in the corridor with a folder he no longer had any real reason to be carrying, heard every word of it. That evening, he found reasons to walk past her desk for separate times, each visit shorter, and more irritable than the last. "Something wrong, Mr. Kang? The prosecutor asked you to dinner. You were listening. The walls in this office are thin. The walls in this office are made of reinforced steel, Mr. Kang. You were listening on purpose. He says he can help find your brother," Vanessa told Min-jun one evening, watching his jaw tighten. "He wants evidence against me. That's the only reason a prosecutor smiles that much. Are you jealous, Mr. Kang? I'm concerned about company security." "Sure you are." Before the gala, Vanessa stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, smoothing the emerald fabric at her waist, arguing with herself in the reflection. "It's a work event," she told herself out loud. "You're attending as staff." The mirror did not disagree, but it also did not stop her hands from shaking slightly as she fastened a pair of small gold earrings, the same pair she had worn her first day in his office. At a charity gala hosted at the Grand Hyatt, Vanessa wore an emerald evening gown that made 3 separate photographers forget who they were supposed to be photographing. Min-jun wore black, his tattooed neck visible above an open collar. And when the orchestra began a slow song neither of them wanted to admit they'd requested, he crossed the room and held out his hand. "I don't want lessons anymore," he said quietly, as they moved together across the floor. "I don't want to learn how to win another woman." "Then what do you want?" "You." Before she could answer, the first gunshot cracked through the ballroom. Chaos erupted, screaming guests, shattered champagne glasses, guards shoving through the crowd toward the exits. In the confusion, security footage would later show Vanessa's face near where the first shot originated, a weapon planted in her handbag that she had never touched, evidence altered so cleanly that even Taehyun's own men hesitated when they looked at her. Han Ji-hoon demanded her execution before the sun rose. Kang Min-jun stood between his own uncle and his assistant, and for the first time in the organization's history, he chose the woman over the family that raised him. He moved her to a secured penthouse across the city that night, guards stationed on every floor beneath them. There, finally, Vanessa told him everything. The intelligence work, the investigation into his organization, her missing brother, the photograph slid under her door 3 days earlier. Before the confession, though, came a quieter evening that neither of them would forget. It was raining hard against the penthouse windows the night Min-jun told her about his father without being asked. He sat on the floor of his study, back against the couch, a glass of untouched whiskey sweating on the table beside him. "My father believed weakness was the only sin that mattered," he said, staring at nothing. "He didn't hit me for failing. He hit me for hesitating." Vanessa sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "That's not strength. That's just fear with better tailoring. I used to think they were the same thing. They're not. I know that now," he said, glancing at her. "You keep teaching me things I should have learned 20 years ago. Somebody has to." He reached over and laced his fingers through hers, and for once neither of them filled the silence with a joke. 2 days later, on the balcony of the secured penthouse where he had finally moved her for safety after the photograph arrived, his face didn't move for a long moment. "You investigated me." "Yes. You let me believe you were only here for a paycheck. I let you believe what kept both of us alive. I don't care that you investigated me," he said, his voice rough. "I care that you never trusted me enough to say it out loud. You raise men who kneel when you enter a room. Forgive me for not assuming honesty would go well. That's not fair. Neither is threatening my brother's life to keep me quiet." The argument turned raw, both of them saying things they had swallowed for weeks. He accused her of hiding behind professionalism because loving a dangerous man terrified her more than any gun ever had. She accused him of surrounding himself with people too frightened to ever tell him the truth, then punishing the one person who finally did. Neither of them noticed the moment the shouting stopped and the kissing started. It was slow, and it was real, nothing like the practiced dinners and rehearsed conversations of the past 30 days. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing unevenly. "Leave Seoul," he said. "I'll give you money, Protection, a new name if you want one. You never have to see this world again. I came here to destroy you, Vanessa said. I'm staying because I found a man worth saving instead. That's not something I'm walking away from now. Together, they uncovered proof that Kim Seo-yeon had not come to the estate willingly. Her younger sister, Park Soo-ah, was being held somewhere on Han Ji-hoon's orders, and the engagement was never a marriage, it was a leash. That night, on the balcony of the secured penthouse, Min-jun got down on one knee, a pistol still holstered at his side. "Marry me," he said, "not as an arrangement, because every future I can imagine without you and it feels empty. Proposing while armed isn't romantic, Mr. Kang." He set the pistol on the table between them. Vanessa glanced pointedly at his ankle. The knife, too. Vanessa accepted on 3 conditions. He would never lie to her about danger, no matter how small. He would begin separating his legal businesses from the criminal ones underneath them. He would treat her as an equal partner, not a decoration locked inside a beautiful house. "Agreed," he said, without hesitation this time. The wedding was arranged quickly, both because Han Ji-hoon's plans were accelerating and because neither of them wanted to wait one more day than necessary. It took place at a glass-walled estate overlooking the Han River, white flowers lining every railing, 200 guests seated beneath strings of warm light, and enough security personnel stationed along the perimeter to guard a visiting head of state. Vanessa wore a fitted white gown with long lace sleeves and a cathedral veil that trailed behind her like a second river. She was the only black woman in the room, and she walked down that aisle with her chin lifted exactly the way she had walked into his office the very first day. Min-jun wore a custom black tuxedo, collar open just enough to show the tattoos climbing his neck, hands trembling as he struggled with his cufflinks behind a closed door 20 minutes before the ceremony. "You've faced assassins without blinking," Taehyun said, watching him fumble the second cufflink for the 3rd time. "It's a wedding, sir. She could still change her mind. She survived your cooking. I don't think a wedding dress scares her." When Vanessa found Min-jun down the hall, still struggling with the second cufflink, she took the cufflinks from his shaking hands and fastened them herself. "I already survived your personality, your cooking, and your mother's ring, which is approximately the size of a doorknob," she said. "Marriage can't possibly be worse." He laughed, and some of the shaking stopped. During the ceremony, he abandoned the formal vows his lawyers had drafted for him and spoke without notes for the first time in his adult life. "I can't promise you a peaceful life," he said, his voice carrying across the silent estate. "I can promise you will never face danger alone again, for as long as I live." Vanessa's vow came steady and clear. "I love the man you're becoming, and I fully intend to keep irritating the man you currently are." Laughter rippled through the guests. Even Han Ji-hoon, seated in the front row, smiled the wide, warm smile that had fooled everyone for over a decade. Their first dance had barely begun when one of the security team leaned into Taehyun's ear and whispered for words that drained the color from his face. "There's a device beneath the platform." The bomb squad worked in careful silence while the band kept playing to avoid a panic. Kim Seo-yeon, still seated near the front, suddenly stood, walked calmly to the security team, and pointed toward a service entrance where 2 of Han Ji-hoon's men had entered 20 minutes earlier carrying catering boxes far too heavy for food. Her betrayal of Han Ji-hoon, quiet and immediate, likely saved a dozen lives. The device was disabled with 4 minutes to spare. Han Ji-hoon was gone before anyone thought to stop him, along with several billion won quietly withdrawn from the organization's hidden accounts earlier that same week. That night, instead of a honeymoon suite filled with champagne, the newly married couple hid inside a reinforced hotel room while Taehyun's men swept the city for threats. Vanessa sat on the edge of the bed, still half-dressed in her wedding gown, helping Min-jun unbuckle a bulletproof vest he had worn underneath his tuxedo the entire ceremony without telling her. "You wore body armor to our wedding. I wore it under the tuxedo. No one could see it. I could have married a man in a normal jacket. You married a man who wanted to survive the reception. He tried to lift her over the threshold of the suite out of sheer stubborn tradition, and her gown caught in the door, both of them laughing helplessly as he wrestled the fabric free. Beneath the exhaustion and the fear of that night sat something steadier. Two people who did not know what tomorrow held, choosing each other anyway. The next morning, Min-jun gathered his remaining commanders and introduced his wife not as a spouse to be protected from business, but as his full partner in whatever war was coming. Several men shifted uncomfortably. None of them argued. Before they left the estate that night, Taehyun found them near the security van, his tie loosened, a bruise already forming along his jaw from wrestling one of Han Ji-hoon's men to the ground. "For the record," he said, "this is the last wedding I plan. Every single one from now on gets a metal detector at the door before anyone says a single vow." "Noted," Min-jun said. "I mean it, sir. I nearly had a heart attack twice tonight. You've survived worse. I've survived worse working for you specifically." Taehyun shot back, and for once Min-jun didn't argue the point. Vanessa, still in half her wedding gown, laughed for what felt like the first time in hours, and the sound of it, easy and unguarded, did more to calm the chaos around them than any amount of security ever could. By noon, the first files appeared online, falsified evidence naming Vanessa Hart as an international operative who had manipulated Kang Min-jun into betraying his own family. Han Ji-hoon's signature was nowhere on the documents, but his fingerprints were on every lie inside them. The attacks came fast after that. Banks froze accounts linked to the Kang group within days. Business partners who had smiled through years of dinners stopped returning calls. Several commanders, quietly paid off, switched allegiance to Han Ji-hoon overnight. Police raided two of the company's legitimate hotels based on evidence that had clearly been manufactured. Min-jun was forced into a choice he never expected to face: protect what remained of the empire his father built, or protect the woman standing beside him. One of his older lieutenants suggested, carefully and only once, that handing Vanessa over temporarily might slow the bleeding. Min-jun removed the man from the organization within the hour and made certain everyone watching understood exactly why. Vanessa refused to hide. Using training she hadn't touched in 2 years, she assembled a small, uneasy team. Taehyun, the newly turned Seo-yeon, and prosecutor Lee Seo-jin, who still fully intended to build a case against Min-jun the moment this particular crisis ended. "I'm not doing this because I trust him," Seo-jin told her flatly, spreading files across a war room table. "I'm doing this because your brother deserves to come home." "I'll take the help," Vanessa said. "I don't need the trust." Seo-yeon, still adjusting to her new role among people who had every reason to hate her family, hung back near the war room's window, arms crossed tight around herself. "You don't have to be here," Vanessa told her, not unkindly. "Nobody's forcing you to stay in this fight. My sister is still out there because of choices I made under his uncle's orders," Seo-yeon said. "I'm not leaving until she's safe. After that, you'll never see me again if that's what you want." "That's not what I want." Vanessa slid a folder across the table toward her. "I want someone who knows how Han Ji-hoon thinks. You're the only person in this room who spent real time close to him without ending up dead." Seo-yeon studied her for a moment, surprised. "You're not what I expected from a Mafia boss's assistant." "I get that a lot. I mean it as a compliment." "I'll take it as one then." They worked through the night, cross-referencing shipping manifests against medical facility registrations, until Vanessa's finger stopped on a small, unremarkable property near Incheon listed under 3 layers of shell companies. "There," she said. "That's where he's keeping people he doesn't want found." Digging through records Han Ji-hoon had never expected anyone to find, Vanessa traced a private medical facility registered under a shell company near Incheon. 2 days later, she stood outside a locked cell inside that building, staring at a man she hadn't seen in over 2 years. Malcolm was thinner than she remembered, a fresh bruise along his jaw, but alive. She crossed the room and held him so tightly he laughed through what sounded like tears. I told you I'd find you, she whispered. Took you long enough, he managed. I was busy getting married. You got married? Malcolm pulled back, staring at her. To him. To him. The Mafia boss. The former Mafia boss. We're working on it. Malcolm looked past her shoulder at Min-jun, who stood near the door, hands loosely at his sides, saying nothing. You kept me alive, Malcolm said to him finally. Ji-hoon's men wanted me gone the first month. Somebody kept moving the order to the bottom of the list. That was me, Min-jun said. I didn't know how to get you out without exposing what you'd found. I'm sorry it took this long. You could have told her the truth 2 years ago. I didn't know if I could trust her yet. Min-jun's eyes moved to Vanessa. I know better now. Once he could speak steadily, Malcolm delivered the piece of the story none of them had anticipated. Kang Min-jun's father hadn't died of a heart attack, as the organization had believed for over a decade. Han Ji-hoon had murdered him and forged the documents that transferred control of the family's illegal accounts into his own hands. Every failed engagement, every bribed woman, every quiet act of sabotage traced back to one motive. Han Ji-hoon wanted the empire without ever having to fight a wife, a child, or a legitimate heir for it. Malcolm added one final detail. Min-jun's late mother had suspected the truth before she died, and had hidden a ledger containing proof somewhere among her son's childhood belongings. That evening, inside the old Kang family home, Vanessa and Min-jun searched through boxes neither of them had opened in years. They found the ledger sewn inside the stuffing of a small, worn stuffed tiger, its fur flattened from decades of being held. Vanessa raised an eyebrow at the toy. You slept with a tiger? I was 7. It's very cute, Mr. Kang. It was a gift from my mother the year my father died. She told me it would protect me while she couldn't. He turned it over slowly in his hands, thumb brushing over a worn patch on its ear. I stopped believing that a long time ago. Maybe she meant it differently than you think. He looked up at her. Maybe she wasn't talking about the toy protecting you, Vanessa said gently. Maybe she was talking about whatever she hid inside it. Proof, waiting for you to be ready to find it. Min-jun stared down at the small, worn animal in his hands like he was seeing it for the first time in 20 years. Slowly, carefully, he began working the old stitching loose along its seam. Then she noticed his hands weren't quite steady, and she stopped teasing because she understood it was the last gift his mother had ever given him, and it had just handed them the proof that would end a war. They found Han Ji-hoon 2 nights later, deep inside the underground complex beneath the mansion, weapons rooms, and vaults branching off in every direction like veins beneath the city itself. Vanessa looked down the long tunnel and, despite everything, couldn't help herself. I told you, she said, that you were too big down there. Min-jun stared at her in disbelief. Now? You're making that joke now. There is never a bad time. Han Ji-hoon turned when he heard footsteps, and for a moment his face still wore the same warm smile he had used at every family dinner for over a decade. Nephew, he said, as though they had simply crossed paths in a hallway. You look tired. Marriage doesn't suit you. You killed my father. Your father was going to hand this family to a boy who cried at his own mother's funeral. I gave you a reason to become someone worth following. You gave me nothing, Min-jun said, voice low and even. You took everything and called it a gift. Han Ji-hoon's eyes flicked to Vanessa, then to Malcolm standing pale but steady behind her. And you, he said, almost admiring. I underestimated you completely. A pity. You would have made an excellent addition to this family, under different circumstances. I'd rather burn it down, Vanessa said, than be part of it. Han Ji-hoon's smile finally slipped. Careless words for someone standing this close to an exit only I know how to open. You're not opening anything, Vanessa said. I redirected every exit in this tunnel system 2 hours ago. You built this basement to keep people in, Mr. Han. You never thought about what happens when it keeps you in too. For the first time, Real fear crossed the old man's face. The confrontation that followed was fast and violent. Han Ji-hoon tried to flee through a service tunnel with the stolen fortune loaded into 2 black cases, threatening to kill Malcolm the moment anyone moved to stop him. Min-jun caught him before he reached the exit. He could have ended it there, the way his father's world had taught him to end every threat. He didn't. Instead, he handed every piece of evidence, the ledger, the falsified death certificate, the bribery records, directly to the authorities, ensuring Han Ji-hoon would face a public trial rather than a quiet death. For a man who had spent his life obsessed with respect and reputation, a courtroom full of cameras was a far crueler sentence than a bullet. The evidence exposed parts of Min-jun's own criminal activity in the process. To protect his wife, his brother-in-law, and the dozens of people caught in Han Ji-hoon's schemes, Min-jun surrendered control of the illegal side of the empire entirely. He lost most of his money, most of his territory, most of the fear that had once kept him safe. He kept his wife, standing beside him as they walked out of the mansion for what felt like the last time, uncertain whether the ordinary life they had once joked about could survive contact with reality. For years past, Kang Min-jun avoided a lengthy prison sentence by cooperating fully with international authorities, handing over evidence against corrupt officials, closing 3 separate trafficking routes, and testifying in a case that made headlines across 2 continents. He kept ownership of the businesses that had never touched the underground world: shipping, cybersecurity, luxury hotels, and with Vanessa running strategy at his side, those businesses began to grow faster than the empire he had lost. Their shipping company became one of the most trusted logistics operations in Asia. Their cybersecurity division built protection systems for banks and hospitals across 3 countries. A new division, funded entirely by their own money, opened to protect witnesses and survivors escaping organized crime, the very kind of protection Malcolm never had. Vanessa became the public face of Kang Group as chief executive. Min-jun ran operations and security, though employees still straightened their posture whenever his tattooed neck appeared above a designer collar in the elevator. The rebuilding wasn't smooth. In the first year, 3 separate investors pulled out of a hotel deal the moment Min-jun's name appeared in the paperwork, and Vanessa spent long nights across the boardroom table from lawyers who wanted every trace of his past scrubbed from public filings. "They want me to erase you from the company history," she told him one night. Exhausted, papers spread across their kitchen table. "Then erase me." "No." She pushed the folder aside. "We're not building something that pretends the last 10 years didn't happen. We're building something that proves people can change and still own what they used to be." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You argue with lawyers for a living now. I did that to you. You didn't do anything to me, Min-jun. I chose this." Slowly, investor by investor, the company's reputation shifted from feared to respected. A profile in a national business magazine ran under the headline "From Shadows to Shipping Lanes," and Min-jun kept a framed copy of it in a drawer he never told anyone about, except Vanessa, who found it while looking for tape. Their home grew louder every year. Their first daughter arrived first, followed by a son 18 months later, and then another daughter after that. Each child inherited their mother's stubbornness and their father's complete inability to accept the word no. Min-jun approached fatherhood the only way he knew how, with excessive, unnecessary security. He installed cameras around the nursery, capable of tracking movement across 3 rooms. He interviewed nannies with the intensity of a man vetting bodyguards for a head of state. Before his eldest daughter's first trip to the park, he prepared a 40-page security plan complete with sightline diagrams. Vanessa tore it in half in front of him. "She's too Min-jun. Not a foreign dignitary. The park has strangers in it. The park has ducks in it." One night, she found him pacing the hallway with their youngest daughter asleep against his tattooed chest, her tiny fist curled into his collar. He didn't hear Vanessa approach until she was standing beside him. Holding her scares me more than facing armed men ever did, he admitted quietly. I finally have something innocent enough to lose. Vanessa rested her head against his shoulder and said nothing, because some moments didn't need a response. Their son, at 3, developed the habit of interrogating dinner guests the exact way his father once interrogated dates, asking visitors their intentions before allowing them near the good silverware. Their eldest daughter, at 5, negotiated her bedtime like a hostage crisis and always won a few extra minutes because her father was constitutionally incapable of saying no to her. You realize you're raising a small version of yourself, Vanessa told him one night, watching their son cross-examine a confused delivery driver about the contents of a pizza box. She gets it from you, Min-jun said, nodding toward their daughter, currently attempting to renegotiate dessert portions with the confidence of a seasoned executive. They get the stubbornness from both of us equally. I'd like that noted for the record. Noted, he said, and kissed the top of her head. Prosecutor Lee Seo-jin, true to his word, closed his investigation into Min-jun only after 2 years of relentless, occasionally exhausting scrutiny, and eventually accepted a standing invitation to family dinners, mostly because Vanessa refused to let old grudges outlast good food. I still don't fully trust you, Seo-jin told Min-jun once, over a plate of his wife's cooking. I still don't fully trust prosecutors, Min-jun said. We're even. Malcolm recovered fully and now ran ethics and internal investigations across the company, a role he approached with the same relentless precision that had gotten him kidnapped in the first place. Seo-yun, freed from Han Ji-hoon's grip and reunited permanently with her sister Soo-ah, became director of the foundation's victim support program. Tae-hyun remained with the family in every capacity except the title and became the children's exhausted, endlessly patient honorary uncle. The marriage stayed honest, which meant it stayed loud. They argued about security budgets, about parenting philosophies, about his habit of solving every disagreement with an absurdly expensive gift. For their 4th anniversary, he gave her an entire private island off the coast of Jeju. I wanted a quiet dinner, Vanessa said, staring at the deed in her hands. The island has a dining room. That's not the point, Min-jun. It has excellent lighting for dinner, though. She threw a couch cushion at his head. He caught it without looking. Beneath the mansion, in the tunnels and vaults that once stored weapons and secrets, construction crews spent 2 years converting the underground complex into a rehabilitation center for survivors of organized crime. Weapons rooms became classrooms. Holding cells became safe, quiet bedrooms with soft lighting and locks that opened from the inside. Old surveillance rooms became medical clinics and counseling offices. The world once hidden down there slowly became a place where people rebuilt their lives instead of losing them. At the center's small opening ceremony, a young woman who had escaped a trafficking ring 2 months earlier stood at a podium built where a weapons rack once stood and thanked the foundation for giving her somewhere safe to sleep that didn't require a lock on the outside of the door. Vanessa, sitting in the front row, felt Min-jun's hand tighten around hers. That used to be an armory, he said quietly, watching the young woman step down to applause. Now it's a library, Vanessa said. Funny how that works out. Nothing about the last 4 years has been funny. A little of it has been, she said, nudging his shoulder. You just weren't allowed to laugh at the time. He allowed himself a small smile, the kind that had once been rare enough to startle his own guards, and now appeared often enough that his children had started imitating it badly at the dinner table. One quiet evening not long after, Vanessa sat Min-jun down at the kitchen table and slid a small folded ultrasound photo across to him. He looked at their 3 children currently dismantling the living room in the next room, then back at the photo, his expression somewhere between joy and quiet panic. Are you certain we have enough security personnel for a 4th? Babies, Vanessa said, are not rival organizations, Min-jun. You say that now. 7 years after the wedding that nearly ended in fire, The Kang family businesses operated across Asia, Europe, and North America, entirely legal, entirely stable, and, for the first time in the family's history, entirely trusted. Their foundation had rescued and rehabilitated hundreds of survivors of organized crime. The underground complex beneath the old estate, once the most feared basement in Seoul, now hosted graduation ceremonies for people rebuilding lives that violence had nearly taken from them. At the opening of its newest wing, Min-jun stood beside his wife and their 4 children, no longer a man who needed fear to keep people close to him. One final piece of the past remained. Han Ji-hoon, now in his final months inside a state prison hospital, requested a private meeting. Min-jun refused at first. Vanessa gently pushed him to reconsider, not so he could offer forgiveness, but so he could finally set the weight down. Inside the sterile visiting room, Han Ji-hoon, thinner and grayer than Min-jun remembered, told his nephew that love had made him weak. Min-jun studied the old man for a long moment before answering. Love gave me the strength to destroy the empire you spent your entire life trying to steal. He left without raising his voice, without cruelty, and without carrying the old man's ghost out of the room with him. That same year, their eldest daughter, now 9, asked why strangers used to whisper her father's name in fear. Min-jun and Vanessa chose honesty over comfort. They explained, in language a 9-year-old could hold on to, that their father had once made dangerous choices and had later chosen, at great cost, to make better ones. Becoming better doesn't erase what you did, Min-jun told his daughter, kneeling to meet her eyes. It means you spend the rest of your life earning the trust you damaged. Their daughter considered this with the seriousness only a 9-year-old could manage. Were you scary? Very. Are you still scary? Only to people who deserve it. Vanessa cut in, ruffling her daughter's hair. Your father saves his scary face for board meetings now. That's not entirely true, Min-jun said. It's mostly true. Their daughter looked between them, satisfied enough with the answer to let it go, and ran off to find her siblings, already forgetting the question in the way children mercifully do. Min-jun watched her go, something unreadable moving across his face. She's going to ask harder questions eventually, he said. She is, Vanessa agreed. And we'll answer those honestly too, when they come. You make it sound simple. It isn't. But it's better than the alternative, and you know it. He nodded slowly and reached for her hand the way he had learned to over the years, without needing a reason or an audience to do it. The night before the renewal, Vanessa found Min-jun standing on the same balcony where he had once knelt with a pistol still holstered at his side, city lights spread out beneath him. Second thoughts? She teased, coming to stand beside him. Only about the tuxedo. Taehyun ordered it a size too small out of spite. I'm certain of it. He's still upset you made him carry a burned chicken across your own office. That chicken ruined a perfectly good moment. It delayed a moment, Vanessa corrected. We got there eventually. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, quiet for a while, watching the same river that had almost swallowed their wedding night in fire 7 years earlier. I used to think love was something men like me weren't allowed to have, he said finally. My father taught me it made you a target. My uncle taught me it made you a fool. And now I think it's the only thing that ever made me dangerous in a way worth being. Vanessa smiled against his shoulder. That was almost poetic, Mr. Kang. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain. The couple renewed their vows privately at the same glass estate overlooking the river where their wedding had nearly ended in flames. This time, there were no bombs, no hidden guards, no falsified files waiting to surface by morning. Their children scattered flower petals with the enthusiasm and precision of small chaotic hurricanes. Taehyun cried openly and insisted, unconvincingly, that something had simply gotten into his eye. Seo-yeon and Soo-ah laughed together near the front row, finally, fully free. Min-jun wore a dark suit with his collar open, tattoos visible along his neck exactly as they'd been the night Vanessa first insulted him in front of an entire restaurant. Vanessa wore ivory silk and the same fearless expression she had carried into his office years earlier, 43 minutes into a meeting that changed both their lives. "You were the first person who ever saw past the monster everyone expected me to be," he told her. "I saw the monster too," she said. "I just found out he could be trained." Later that evening, back home, their 4 children had covered the living room walls with crayon drawings of the family, stick figures with wildly exaggerated tattoos, and one very confused-looking tiger. Their youngest asked how their parents had fallen in love. Vanessa smiled and told them she had once informed their father that he was too big down there. The children looked at each other, thoroughly confused. Min-jun nearly dropped his glass. "She means," Vanessa explained, biting back a laugh, "that his underground empire was too large, his mansion was too dramatic, his security team took itself far too seriously, and his ego alone took up more space than the rest of this family combined." Later, standing together on the balcony while their children's laughter drifted out from inside, Min-jun asked whether she still thought he was too much. "You're still stubborn," Vanessa said. "Still overprotective. Still covered in more tattoos than a man your age has any business having. And you still can't buy a reasonably priced anniversary gift to save your life. Is that a no?" She rested her head against his shoulder. "It's a yes," she said quietly. "You're exactly enough for me." Below them, the city lights stretched out toward the harbor, past the glass towers of Kang Group and the old estate now filled with classrooms instead of guards, past the restaurant where a barefoot woman once fled through a kitchen door, past every version of the man Min-jun used to be before a stranger with a sharp tongue looked at his whole terrifying empire and told him, plainly, that it was simply too big. He had spent years believing size and fear were the same thing as strength. It took losing almost everything to learn the difference. It took a woman brave enough to say the truth out loud, in front of an entire restaurant full of strangers, when everyone else in his life had only ever known how to whisper carefully around him, afraid of what the truth might cost them. Inside, the sound of their 4 children laughing over something none of the adults would ever fully understand drifted out into the night air, warm and unpolished and completely unafraid. The right kind of love, in the end, never asked a person to hide from their own darkness. It asked them to face it, take responsibility for it, and spend the rest of their life building something worth the cost. Kang Min-jun had once been rejected by every woman in Seoul, humiliated in dining rooms and society pages, whispered about in every corner of a city that feared and envied him in equal measure. It took the one woman who refused to be afraid of him to teach him he was never impossible to love. He had simply spent his whole life surrounded by people who profited from keeping him alone, and it took a fearless assistant with a sharp tongue and a sharper eye to finally see past the empire and find the man underneath it, waiting, all along, to be forgiven for a darkness that was never entirely his own making.